Flowers in November. I gotta love California. Hi, this is Fayme Harper. My friends at AllFreeKnitting.com asked me to share with you how to do Stockinette Stitch, one of the most basic stitches in knitting and the foundation of many other things like cabling. I'm going to use size 7 straight needles today so you can see what I'm doing, but you can use any yarn or needles for this technique. Here is some knitting I've been working on. This part right here, the smooth part, that is called Stockinette Stitch. On the back it looks like this, which looks like garter stitch. So the lumpy side is usually the back, this is usually the front. Now once you are good at this and you want to learn to do cables, you put the cables on top of this and that makes them stand out on this nice smooth background. So right now I'm going to teach you to do stockinette. This part down here at the bottom, this is called ribbing, and that's the stretchy part like you might find at the end of a sweater sleeve at your wrist or around the neck of a sweater. It has some give to it so that it hugs onto you, and it's often used for the brim of a hat as well. So first I'm going to do the stockinette video, and then I'm going to do the ribbing video. Now with knitting there's various ways to hold the tension onto the thread or yarn. I like the pinky method where it wraps around my pinky like so and then over the top of my hand. But use whichever method you're familiar with, like so. And this acts as, if you have a sewing machine, there's that little thing that jumps up and down to keep the thread taut. That's what I do with my index finger. Alright, now we're going to go the first row on the right side. Knitting goes in the back door, remember? So we're going to knit, knit. Now if you're new to knitting, let's get this up here so it's not too tight, you never want to work right on the tips because the tips taper downwards, and if you think of the knitting needle as a rod that's your gauge for how big your loops are, obviously if you work down here you're not going to get a regular. Your sizes of loops are going to be all over the place. So, trying to get an even tension, we're just going to go down the row. We're going to knit every stitch. In the back door, wrap around, pull forward, slide off. Pull forwards, slide off. Now you know once you're off, you really can't go anywhere else as long as you don't dip down and let it slide off the needles. Keep your points up. And as you practice more, your gauge will even out. I don't want you obsessing over, struggling to get every tension just right, because that will stress you out and your knitting will be even more tense. So just practice. Think of other things while you're doing it and your body will work it out. Now as you get to the end of the row, you need to pay particular care that you don't let the needles get away from you and fall out of your stitches. Because there's so much weight on one side and none on the other, it can easily slip off. If you have that happen a lot, switch to bamboo needles or wooden needles for a while because they have more friction. Okay, I've got one stitch left, so I'm just going to knit it the normal way. Get rid of this needle, and now we're going to turn the whole deal around. And this side looks like purl, the bumpy side. I do have a tutorial on how to purl if you don't know that yet. Now, we're going to purl the next row, which means I go in the front door, like walk, 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 walk. Knock, 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 let me in. I'm going in the front door. And purl you push away from you and slide off. Some people find purling a little more complicated because we're not used to pushing away. We're not used to pushing things away from us. We're more used to pulling things towards us. So, if you have to go slower, go slower. Going to purl along. Every stitch is going to be purled. And that's P-U-R-L for those of you that just learned. It's not like the gemstone, like the kind that grow in a seashell. P-U-R-L. Kind of rhymes with furl, like a flag unfurls. Not a whole lot of other rhymes for purl that are spelled the same way. Now we're almost to the end of the purl row. As you can see, Slow down when you get to the end if you need to. Here we come to the very last one. Right, and turn it around. Now, if at all possible, I know when you're a mom it's not always possible, but now this isn't quite long enough to be my mitt yet, so I'm going to do stockinette, maybe this much more, another 5 inches, and then when I get to the ribbing part I'll make another tutorial for you on how to do the ribbing, and then hopefully I'll get around to making a tutorial on how to make the mitts soon. I know in the real world it's hard to sit down long enough to knit a whole row, but try not to set your knitting down in the middle of a row. It's real easy to get confused when you come back, and it kind of mucks with the tension if you just leave it laying around. So try to always get to the end before you set it down. I know for you moms out there that's not always possible, because it seems like the minute you start knitting, one of your children suddenly decides to, eat out of the dog dish or something. You gotta jump up, but try not to do that. Now I'm doing back and forth knitting in Stockinette Stitch. If, for example, you need to do Stockinette Stitch on circular needles and you're making a tube, like the body of a sweater or a tubular scarf, you knit every stitch, and the purl side, this bumpy side, that will be on the inside of the tube. So even though you're knitting every single row around and around, it's still considered Stockinette Stitch, which is the knitting is on one side and the purling is on the other. You didn't know you were automatically purling, did you? Every time I make a knit stitch, it's knit on the front side, but the back side's purl stitch. It's one of those weird paradoxes of knitting. It still boggles my mind. I've done my Stockinette Stitch as far as I can go, so that's all for now, and enjoy making your Stockinette Stitch. Get lots of practice, you're going to use that one a lot. Enjoy your new knitting skills and have fun. Go visit us at AllFreeKnitting.com. Toodles!